Evening and welcome to our second Ballinasloe Library Comic-Con, and I've been joined this evening by a notable publisher and operator in the Comic-Con field, and that's Mr. Wayne Talbot. Wayne, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Colin. How's it going?
Mighty. So just tell us a little about yourself and how you became perhaps interested in the whole role of cartoon and comic strip and cartoon characters. And all
Well,
that.
I am one of three members who run a publishing label called Rogue Comics Ireland, and we've been going since 2017. It's myself and Kevin Keane and Gillian Dempsey, and we've a plethora of other creators that are involved in the label as well, but we're the three mainstays that run the label directly. And what we do is, the reason why we set up Rogue Comics is, within Ireland, for the longest time, there was no real comic publisher that showed people, guided them from start to finish how to put a book in print, how to put a comic book in print. And we had the skill sets between us, the knowledge base, how to do that. So what we did, we sat down and said, look, let's put this together. Let's show people, because there's a lot of people in the Irish comic book scene that want to make books and want to put books out there, want to self-publish. But there's no real how-to guide, or there's no group that can tell you how. There's plenty of people publishing books, but there's no collective that can say, come to us, we'll show you how to do it, and the book will be yours and it's out in the world. So we set about doing that. We launched my first book, The Broker, which launched in 2017 at the launch of the label, was the first title, full complete book that was launched on the label. And then from that, then we had people submitting their work, and we had people coming to us at shows that we built upon. That we had Kev Keane, himself and Shane Ormond came to us with books called The Guards, and they were published through Rogue as well. And then from that, then we built our library of books. We have an artist from Carlow now who's an animator as well, and he's worked on a book called Ocean City, which is a very, very successful all ages miniseries that is available through Rogue Comics. And he's now also, his second book, Jumpsuit Johnson, is his follow-up title. It's a completely different idea, and he's doing that. So we got these individuals kind of at the base of what we had at the beginning, and we built from that. And people came to us and said, well, look, how do I write a book? How do I get an artist to draw my book? How do I edit my book? And how do I get it to print? And that's kind of what we decided to do. We kind of built our platform, and we give anyone that comes to us that we deem is viable, because we do get a lot of people that come to us and say, look, I want to make a comic book. I've got this great idea. It's like, great, show us your script. I was like, well, I don't have a script. It's like, well, you need that. So you kind of lay out the kind of stipulations of what are required in order to get a viable product that you can put out in the world. Because like I said, there wasn't anyone doing that. And since then, since 2017, we've grown exponentially. Our library of books has grown from a small handful to close to 15 to 16 titles now. Like I said, I have my original book, The Broker. I launched in 2019, in November of 2019, I launched my second book called Nosferatu, which is a World War II horror story. Kev has worked with another Irish writer, Derek O'Leary, and brought out a book in aid of the Irish Cancer Society, actually called Cancer. We've had continued success for Ocean City. We have another writer and artist combo of Brian Corcoran and Richard Gaynor, who are coming together to release a series called By Proxy, and that's due to release in March. We also have Danny Earls, who's a fantastic artist and writer and creator, who's bringing out his book Hellfire. And all of these books are going to be launched very, very soon at Dublin Comic-Con in March, because through everything that's gone on over the last 2 years, we just made a decision that it was kind of pointless trying to launch books during a pandemic on a larger scale. So we kind of dialed it back a bit, focused on getting our books made, showing people how to get books made. And I think that's served us well, because we now have a large collection of books ready to launch, ready to go, and will be available to the public in the very near future.
Great. That's hugely of interest. But I'm minded that for those who might be viewing along with me, what sparked your own personal interest in this space?
Sure.
Was it as a youngster? Was it as a teenager? Was it your first visit
definitely.
to
So
the
as
movies?
a youngster,
where did you get this passion for the comic strip, the comic book, and all this?
Well, I grew up reading comics, obviously, at an early age. From around 10 or 11, I picked up my first comic book. 2000 AD would be my first intro into comic books itself. From there, then it went to the usual, like you hear everyone talk about Spider-Man, X-Men, Batman. It's the stereotypical cliche for a reason, because that's what was on the shelves. That was readily available for everyone. But 2000 AD was my first mainstay in comics, and from that, then weirdly enough, I stemmed a love of animation, and then I followed that, and I went to animation college and I studied animation for 4 years. And worked on numerous projects throughout the years, and started my own studio with animation for a short period of time, and then decided that after a long while that animation wasn't for me. And in a roundabout way, then it led back to comics, doing everything. So I was heavily involved in the Comic-Con scene in Ireland, for both panels and workshops. And I knew some people that worked in comics, and I had people approaching me that, like, would you be interested in doing a comic? And one thing led to another, and I was like, okay, yeah, let's give it a go. And I had artistic ability, I had writing ability, and I was like, I'm going to put it to the test, see what it's like, and that's what The Broker became. So it started out with a love of Judge Dredd, Batman, X-Men, Spider-Man, all of the usual stuff, and even at that as well, like that during the 90s, a lot of that stuff was in cartoon form. So you had the Spider-Man cartoon, and even the 80s with the Amazing Spider-Man and Friends. And then you had the X-Men cartoon in the 90s, which I think everyone of my generation absolutely loves and can hum the theme tune on cue. And then obviously not forgetting the Batman animated series with Kevin Conroy in the role of Batman and Mark Hamill as the Joker, famously. So I mean, I'm very lucky to be of a generation where we were nurtured quite steadily with a supply, like obviously not as much that people have nowadays, like where it's in every second month is this new movie outing from Marvel.
Yeah.
But back in the day, we had our outlets of comics, animation, and it led to film, and I think that's where it was all nurtured from. So that kind of my passion built from there.
Okay, and having been a student and a follower of the comic process from a very young age, what would you think has been the defining features for you watching the space as a passionate player for the last number of decades? Has been the key elements of the Irish engagement with the comic scene, or how have you seen it develop or grow? Or, was it a group of very small outsiders in the 80s, which became mainstream in the 90s and in the 90s, and now it's less them over there? It seems to be more popular. Would that be fair, or is that just
There was always a small bit of Irish representation, and it has grown exponentially over the last decade for sure. I think in the 80s it was less so. There was a few names you'd know in the big names in the comics, and there was individuals that you would know that would be tentpole names in comic books. But now with the likes of Declan Shalvey, Stephen Mooney, Will Sliney, Nick Roach, there's a large Irish contingency. Trina Farrell, who's a very well-renowned colorist, Dervla Kelly, another writer and colorist, Moira McHugh, Michael Carroll. There's a huge cadre, and now, like, I'm very proud to say that one of our own in Rogue Comics, Kevin Keane, is making his big leap into comic books now as an Irish creator, in working with Todd McFarlane, probably the biggest name in comic books now, with Spawn. He's working on Gunslinger Spawn. So I think with regards to like the 80s into the 90s into the now, I think there was a generation of my generation that grew up wanting to do that type of thing. And back in the 80s and 90s, it was harder to get into it because it wasn't so much, it wasn't nepotistic in any way, but we were readers of a lot of English comics, and that scene over there was very different. It was, you basically had to go there because it wasn't like you couldn't work digitally, you couldn't work at home and send the stuff. You'd have to be very prolific to be able to do that. Yes, you could send your artwork hand drawn across the pond and see where it got you, but it got few people. Or if you're a writer, you'd send your scripts in, and writing was probably a lot easier to get into to a degree. But with regards to the Irish contingency, like the one name that always sticks out to me when it comes to a writer, when it comes to comics, somebody who's made their way probably before a lot of us now want to do it is Michael Carroll, because he's been writing Judge Dredd for 2000 for the longest time, and has been in the comic book industry for the longest time. And I think he's done it so successfully and so well that he's garnered a following all of his own in a field that is predominantly dominated by the likes of John Wagner and anyone else that's written Dredd over the years. He is the one big Irish name that you kind of go, right, now he's still working, but he's been doing it for such a long time. And then you have Declan Shalvey, Stephen Mooney, who are of my age, and well, Shalvey's a bit younger than me, but they've been doing it very well with DC and Marvel now across the pond and Image. And yes, they've kind of put Ireland on the map. Will Sliney, definitely. So I think the Irish contingency has grown exponentially and will continue to grow, because everyone's now noticing that we're always been a hotbed of creativity in Ireland, always, for multiple forms of media, not even just comics. But I think we're renowned for being workhorses. We get our work in on time. We hit the deadlines, and that's a key thing for comic books. You could be the best draftsman in the world, or the best draftswoman in the world, and the best colorist, and the best writer, but if you're not able to deliver on time and in a sharp fashion that these publishers want, you're not going to last very long. And the Irish have a mentality and a reputation for being very good at that. And I think that's what's helped us along the way, and will continue to help us along the way.
That's very encouraging to hear, particularly those who might be thinking of a career choice in this area. Just, you spoke earlier about the sort of the one-stop shop theme behind Rogue Comics, and in guiding people through the whole process of getting their idea from, a sketch through the commissioning process, through writing. And just give us I suppose the processes and challenges of coming up with the idea and then getting it to you guys in a way that a pitch can be made of it, and you can test its viability and then get it to plate. Just now, long story short, but what are the challenges in today's world as an Irish bustling artist or creative trying to get into this space? What are you seeing at the moment, and what are the key challenges and processes that you are guiding people through?
Well, I mean, as far as challenges are concerned, it's having the right mentality to know that it's going to take a long time to do. It's not going to happen overnight. My last book took close to 1.5 years, 2 years to create from scratch, start to finish. So it's not something that I have a script, let's go, we're going to have this done in 6 months. So I think that's the first challenge you have to get over is, you have a script, great. It has to be nitpicked, and we have to go through it either with an editor, and we've got one of the best in Rogue, with Gillian Dempsey, with an editor who can look at you and go, right, this is a viable comic book script. And if it isn't, let's show you how it can be. And some writers come in and they give you their life story in a script, like it's extremely descriptive. And some artists like that in comics. They're like a highly descriptive script that will give you every nook and cranny of every panel you're going to draw. But you need to know the pinpoints of a story in order to get the point across. And that's as far as a writer is concerned, that's something you always have to realize as well. As an artist, being able to draw sequentially is a key thing. I can draw. I'm an artist. I can draw. I can't draw sequentials. I just can't. I paint. I draw still images. Sequentials, it's like storyboarding in film. I can storyboard, but I can't sequential stories. I can write a script to give to an artist and they can sequential the story for me. But if you can't do that, then as an artist, you need to learn how to do that properly as a storyteller and be able to tell a story within sequential art. Because you can't hit the beats of a story and build your page in a way that makes it flow, because there is always a flow to a comic book page. Like, depending on whether it's a Western comic or an Eastern comic, because in Eastern comics, they go right to left, and in the West, they go left to right. So it depends on how you're doing your story, and you have to be able to guide the eye through the page. And a lot of young artists, when they're getting into comics, they think, I'm just going to draw this pose and then draw the next panel and draw the next panel. And if the story doesn't flow in those images, the story isn't going to flow at all and people aren't going to be able to read it. But that's another challenge that artists have to get over. I think overall, it's just a realization that this isn't an overnight thing. It's not going to be done quickly. You're going to hit snags on the writing scale, the drawing scale, coloring, lettering, editing, then getting it to print and bring it into print correctly, getting in the format that you want. So there are hurdles that you have to hit, and you have to get over at every step. And that's what in Rogue, that's what we teach people how to do. And we guide them through it. We give them the right pointers, because each book is different. You would have, like, we have another artist and writer on our label, Claire Foley, who is vastly different to everyone else that we have on the label, because she is very classically a trained eye for art. She paints in watercolors. So her stories are very different to, say, somebody who's a graphic artist who will be drawing superhero books. So you have to have a different approach for every individual project. So yeah, that kind of would be the thing. You have to have your own approach for that project, for what you're bringing to the table, and also be willing to accept constructive criticism. Because if you can't, then you're not going to get anywhere.
Can I ask
anyone that's going to give? Yeah.
Sorry, a very rude layman's question here. What sustains a creative for 18 months of scripting, paletting, page by page, proofing, perfecting the storyboard of the synopsis or the plot or the story of the characters, to a point where they can get their publication onto shelves or onto the online catalogs and get it sold? What keeps them in? What keeps milk in their fridge?
It depends on the individual. So.
Okay.
It depends on your status as well. I mean, I work a full-time job as well as managing part of Rogue Comics, and as well as publishing and writing my own books. So I'm one of the lucky ones where I have the time and the support and the ability to be able to do it as kind of like a second job, as a passion project.
Okay. Some
people aren't as lucky. Some people, they sustain themselves as full-time jobs as artists, doing commissions, working for other people. Like a writer could write up a script, depending on how good they are and how quick they are, or should reverse that, how quick they are and how good they are at writing it. Yeah. Depending on how they do it, they could bang up a script pretty quickly if they have a clear vision in their mind and the editing process is done quick enough. An artist would take longer to do the book. So the way we work is, if somebody comes to us with a script, we would then put them in touch with artists that they would have to pay to get the work done. So the way Rogue manages is that we allow you access to a lot of people that are creatives, that know how to put books together, how to draw books, how to letter books, how to edit books. And then it's up to the individual creators and the teams to work out their contracts and their payments between themselves. Yeah. So if I went to, say, Kev Keane with a script, say, Kevin, I have a script here, I want you to draw the book. And he's like, great, here's my page rate. And he'd give you his page rate for how much it costs for him to draw a page. And you would have come to an agreement on how you're going to pay him. And you'd pay him for the page that he's going to draw. Myself, I would, as a writer and as a creator of the book, I would recoup my expenses on the back end. So what that would mean is, when the book is in print and it's selling, and it sells substantial amounts, I would then recoup. Like, nobody gets into comics to make money. Like, that's the rule number one. If you think you're going to make a comic book and you're going to write a comic book that's going to be a huge hit and everyone's going to buy it and you're going to be writing for Marvel and DC in 6 months' time, that may happen. Not saying it's not going to, but do not get into comics to make money. Because unless you're, Sean Gordon Murphy charging your page rate that you can charge, you're not going to get there overnight, unless you're a phenom, which is a rare thing. I've been doing this now for a good few years, and while I am very happy with my output and the input that comes into Rogue, I am in no way a superstar or a very rich person. So that is one of the misnomers to people, because people think they see these films in the cinema, Marvel movies, DC movies, all these other comic book films that are coming out, and they think, I'm going to write a comic book and I'm going to sell it to Marvel and DC and it's going to become a film and I'm going to make millions. That's not how it works. That is, straight off the bat, that's not how it works. And that is one of the things that we have had to quash that in some people sometimes, where people will come to us and go, I have the best idea in the world for a story, let's make it into everything. So it doesn't always work.
And I suppose that leads on to another question that I think would be of interest to the passionate and the layman, is the stand. You've gone through very elaborately the various creatives that are within your stable, if you like, of the Rogue Comics. But overall, what's the standing of the Irish comic creator in the international scene? And if I was halfway through a college course in animation or in multimedia design or something, and I was thinking of, well, would I go down this road? What's the market's appetite? You mentioned earlier on that the Irish illustrator, the Irish creative in this space has a very good track record, because they can get stuff done on time and their work rate, you would describe them as workhorses. But is there sufficient market demand out there for the type of material that we are typically producing to generate sales or to generate? Have we a niche of the market covered, and is there an appetite for more work? I guess
I don't think it's necessarily an Irish thing. I don't think it's just because you're an Irish creator that's sought after. I think it depends on your work ethic. It depends on your ability. Like, you can have all the passion in the world, but if you can't write or you can't write a jot, or you can't draw anything more than a stick man, you're not going to get very far. So if somebody is in an animation course, like you said, or an illustration course, and they want to dip their toe in the world of comics, I'd say give it a go for sure. We're more than happy to facilitate that if you're, of the ability that you can produce something that's going to basically, at the end of the day, sell for yourself. Because, like I said, Rogue Comics don't take a cut of profits of anyone. We give you the platform, we show you how it's done, and the book and the IP is yours, and off you go with it. It's published through the Rogue label, and we will publish it for you. But as far as Irish creators are concerned and their demand, again, it depends on the individual. Like, I've seen artists and writers who are phenomenal, and they expect, like I said, they expect it to happen to them overnight to become phenoms and well-renowned creators, and they're not picked up for whatever reason, and they just have to keep going and keep trying. So I think with regard to the demand of an Irish creator, it's not so much the Irish part, it's more so if they're a good creator and a good collaborator with other people, and they can work within a group and work to deadlines and work with a good editor. And that's kind of what all what boils down to.
I was interested in a point you raised there that, it's not being consumed or it's not being sought after because it's particularly Irish. So is there a very flattening to the strands of styles that perhaps 40 or 50 years ago, a British sense of a comic character was very different from an American, from a Japanese, from an Oriental, whereas there has been over the last 10 or 20 years a flattening out of that particular discernment, and that people are more interested in good stories and good narratives, good illustrations, clean copy, as opposed to, you have to watch this or you have to read this. This is German and it's great because it's German, or it's great because it's Australian. It's great because it's good. Am I picking that up right?
No, I get what you're saying. Yeah, no, I think that is definitely the case. I think the nationality and the like, although there is counters to the point, particularly in Irish. So Paul Bulger, a fantastic creator, has recently announced that his book Hound, or The Hound, has been picked up by Dark Horse Comics in the States and will be republished over there in a beautiful hardback edition of the full 3 volumes. Now, Hound is an Irish book based on the story of Cuchulainn, and phenomenal. Like, him and Barry Devlin did an amazing job on that book, and it is a Bible of storytelling for a lot of people, and it looks beautiful. And and Paul is definitely one of the best artists to ever come out of Ireland, and he started in animation and he started in film production, and he's a very well renowned musician as well. He kind of ticks. He's a 5'2" man. He ticks all the boxes. But that book is going to be launched next year by Dark Horse. So that's a very Irish story, a very Irish idea. And I think that will sell because of that. But as far as creators are concerned, like, for example, my 2 books that I've created, Nosferatu was a World War II story. The main character in it was Irish, but he was Irish-American. There wasn't necessarily anything Irish about it. It was based on a true event with a mixture of supernatural horror mixed in. My first book, The Broker, was a suspense thriller that is based in America again. But that wasn't the selling point per se. So I think it depends on your audience. It depends on what you're selling and how you're selling it, like any product. So you could sell something on its Irishness, or if it's a British character, it's Britishness, or an American character, it's American. Like, you don't get any more American than Captain America, and people buy that character for his upstanding kind of way and his ideals to a degree, and how that character is written. But there's other things that people buy stuff for that there's nothing to do with the overall nationality of the team involved or the story involved as regards nationality. So yeah, it does depend on the product.
Great. And you touched on it earlier, how the arrival of a pandemic had perhaps stalled or slowed down the rush to go to print with pre-Christmas editions, or with getting out there to the scene in delivering new publications. Have there been any other noticeable trends from your perspective of what the last 19 months have brought to the sector in an Irish situation?
Sure. There has been a lot of crowdfunded work that has kind of shot through the roof, and some of them have been very successful, and some of the Irish creators have been very successful. We just decided that it wasn't for us. But there have been, like, both Declan Shalvey and Stephen Mooney have done Kickstarters, and there was a group headlined by another Irish label called Library Comics, and also they're on their irishcomics.ie. There's an anthology called Turning Roads that was produced through a Kickstarter, and that was quite successful. So the crowdfunding seemed to have been a way as a delivery model for a lot of people during the pandemic to produce books and deliver them through that model. We didn't see it ourselves as something we could do because our books were in production already, and our creative teams are already in production with those. So that wasn't something we were kind of going after. But that's the big thing that I saw change in a trend, because there was no conventions to launch books at. There was no stores open that you could go and do signings at because people couldn't congregate. So creators found their own special way of doing it, and it was through crowdfunding. There were some issues overall with mainstream comics as far as distribution problems are concerned. Like everything during the pandemic, distribution was the thing. So the crowdfunding model was probably the best way of getting books out there if you felt that's what you could do, you know?
And then finally, if I may, ask you to put your what is it, crystal ball? Is it switch that on and have a gaze into the future for the sector? Are you reasonably confident about the role of Irish animators, illustrators, and Irish creatives in the space and the sector generally, as you look forward towards the end of this difficult year and the next few seasons?
I think the next year is going to be like definitely into next year when the comic conventions start coming back in full. Like, I mean, there are some English conventions that are coming back at the end of this year, but I think that personally, I think it's a bit too soon. But there are some creatives that are going to be at that. Irish creatives are going to be at that. But I think March of next year, Dublin Comic-Con is coming back March of next year, and I think that's going to be a big convention and a big show that a lot of Irish creatives, a lot of comic book creatives are going to be involved in, that they could, take part in. And I think that's definitely going to be something that's going to be big and a viable launch pad, because we're going to be launching our books at it. We've, like, all the titles that I've mentioned previously that have yet to come out, they will be launched at Dublin Comic-Con because it is a very large platform. It is a great place to launch new books. And that's where a lot of the independent creators do launch books, is at shows. Because you have kind of the crowd that come to see you specifically to buy your books, and then you have an organic crowd that appear just to be at the show and just to be there for the sake of it. So that is a big thing. And I think that's going to be the start of the return to normalcy to a degree for a lot of creators. So.
And just one final point that I'm fascinated in. The rise of modern multimedia technology has been in some quarters to the demise of the traditional printed word in magazine, in book, in newspaper publishing. Do you see that trend mirroring in this space, or do you think that new technology is propping up the sector as opposed to dampening down the traditional methods of seeing our stories and our comic strips in the round?
I think it's propping it up, and it has been for years. So for the longest time, comic books were done by hand on paper. They were printed obviously on paper, but they were drawn on paper, colored on paper, colored, digital coloring wasn't a thing 10, 12 years ago. And then that shot through the roof with the invention of the likes of the Wacom tablets and iPads and all sorts of kind of add-ons that you could do everything on. Web comics have been around for years and continue to be a source of much enjoyment by a lot of comic book readers, but comic book print will never die. The monthly or bi-weekly issues of comics will never die. Graphic novels will never die, because they are a much loved. I don't think the printed word, as far as books are concerned, is going to die. Yes, the odd newspaper and publication magazine, that type of thing, may not be something that is going to be around forever, because I think they're time capsules of what they are when they're printed. Whereas a comic book is something you will reread over and over and over again. So I don't think it's going away anytime soon. And I think constant achievements within the field of being able to draw and color and create digitally are only going to bolster it and make it easier for people to actually get into it, because we now have the tools at our disposal. And that's why, as independent publishers, we're able to do what we can do, because we have the tools at our disposal to be able to do this by ourselves and put the books out there by ourselves and be able to get our stories out there, because we're not relying on bigger labels to pick up our books. we have the tools at our fingertips to do this. And that's all through the thanks of technology and it becoming simpler to be able to write, draw, color, edit, and publish books. It's just, it's kind of a progression of it.
Good to hear that. Wayne, thank you very much. This has been a very, very interesting chat, and thank you for giving so freely of your time and your expertise in this space.